As we had called out in the preview episode for the 31 Days of Halloween, where we went through our honorable mentions, we called out that we are covering 80 years or 8 decades worth of horror movies, including some that have come out this year that flew under the radar that we did not see. And this is another one. Welcome to another episode of the Popcorn Confessional. And this is Dave from Nerdbox, and I'm accompanied by my wife Jen, also from Nerdbox. And on this episode of the 31 Days of Halloween, we are talking about my best friend's exorcism. So fire up that Jiffy Pop and meet us in the booth.
This is Brian O'Holler, and you're watching the Popcorn Confessional on the Nerdbox. Sounds like a porn site.
It is 1988, and Abby Rivers has just started her sophomore year of high school. She's a bit of an outsider and is glad to have her best friend Gretchen by her side. But one day when they spend the night at a friend's house and discover an abandoned house in the woods, their relationship changes when Gretchen begins to act a bit abnormal after being left in the house by herself.
This is a horror comedy that mixes in the high school drama that you would see in the movie like Booksmart or 17 with The Evil Dead and a side of Exorcist in it. The story is very good because it's a slow transformation that Gretchen goes through. And Abby, a concerned friend, is trying to help her. And she kind of trips up and goes down the wrong path at some time, assuming that it's something that it may not be. Which only makes her own life a little bit more complicated by pushing her further on the outskirts of her friends, her school, and even some parents in the community.
Yeah, she doesn't have that many friends to begin with, so she just kind of like... she's further ostracized, which, of course, we all know sucks.
Yeah. Elsie Fisher does a great job in the role of Abby. Very believable.
Yeah. And looks completely different than what she looks like in real life. It's amazing what they did with just like a wig or whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah, makeup and a wig and you transform a person. Oh, yeah. We've seen that in a lot of movies.
Yeah. Now, this is based on the 2016 horror novel written by Grady Hendrix, and the screenplay was written by Good Girls writer and producer Jenna Lamia.
I'm sure you like that.
I do, because I love Good Girls. It was my favorite TV show for 4 seasons, and then it just up and ended it.
Yeah, well, there's reasons for that.
But I'm not bitter.
This is another retro film that is in our picks for this month, including, not in our picks, but also Terrifier, right? It's a little bit of a throwback to the 80s, even though it's modern times.
Yeah.
And like we called out in the VFW review, it doesn't dive into like, hey, let me put all these Easter eggs in here to make you think it's the 80s, right? So you can look at all of it and really be transformed or transported back into that time. That's not like that. It's just, it's 80s, and you can see it by the clothing that they're wearing and some of the aesthetics of the houses. So a lot of that 80s-ness is there just because that's there. Not everybody had all these 80s posters in their room like they were a kid living in Robbie's room in Poltergeist.
Yeah. Their hairstyles, the fact that she wore, like, you know, all these colorful bracelets on her wrists, and, you know, she wore a lot of them, right? Because that's what we used to do. We used to stack them, because the more, the better. And so, yeah, I mean, it definitely pulls the 80s.
There is a lot of good conflict between the characters here, between Abby and Gretchen, as she is going through the transformation into becoming fully possessed by the spirit that she encountered at the home, which I thought was really good. And I really start to feel for Abby throughout this entire film, just the way she was being treated. It just sucked. So to see, you get to travel and see the story arc of both of those characters and how she deals with it. And then there were also some cool side characters that were in this film, like the Jesus brothers that are traveling from high school to high school and they're promoting fitness. Yes, kids, I don't know about in your area, but when I was in school, we had this guy dressed up in a bodysuit with the human anatomy, and he'd come to school and he'd talk to you about eating vegetables and exercising. So I could relate to that.
We never had that. We did have the person that they showcased in Never Been Kissed, where they came in and with the bananas and the condoms, and they try to like teach you how to use those. So that's always a fun thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the Jesus-loving, over-the-top, Jesus saves you group that comes to the high school.
The Lemon Brothers, I think they were. The Lemon Brothers.
Anyway, so one of the brothers happens to kind of just like, wait a minute. That girl's a little weird. And not talking about Abby, talking about Gretchen, because he kind of picks up on it. So he becomes her pseudo-priest exorcist, which I thought was hilarious. Hilarious. It was funny as hell to see him trying to come up with the exorcist.
Yeah, he wasn't good at it. He sucked at it, right? He was terrible. And he really thought that he really thought he had this, right? That he was like the perfect person for it, and he is a bumbling idiot.
The whole exorcism scene in this film is funny as hell. The things that they do with salt.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, just like throwing it on your face. Like, yeah. He's an idiot.
Yeah. This movie is, like I said, it came out this year. This is one of the new ones that we watched.
Yeah.
It is available on Amazon Prime, so go check it out. And there is some Evil Dead pulls in here. Some of the sounds that Gretchen makes are definitely from Evil Dead 1 and maybe 2. And then there's a little surprise in there that I'm not going to ruin for you, but you look at it and it's like, ooh. Ooh. Yucky. But if you're looking for a horror comedy, not just something that is going to scare everybody, this is one to check out. You can watch it with teenagers, maybe soon-to-be teenagers. I think they'll enjoy it as well.
No, I was going to say you probably don't want to, because you might have some uncomfortable silences or questions. Like when she says she rubs her nub.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was quite a few references.
I think some of those lines may go over their heads, just like that movie that you went to see, the animated movie, where the guy had the picture covered in stuff.
Well, our girls were like,
well,
they knew that wasn't right. They just didn't know what it was.
Yes, but they're teenagers, so they kind of picked up on it but didn't know what it was. So there are, as my wife mentioned, there are some lines like that that may just come out quick and over the head, but there are other topics that are happening in this movie that are worth a discussion with your kids, and that's around the drug use part. So that's always good to talk about when it's in the films and why you should or why you shouldn't do it. So
don't pop pills, kids.
Yeah. And you can use that, say, like, see, if you pop pills, you're gonna get possessed by a demon. So,
and maybe they'll believe you.
Yeah, maybe they will. Some kids do. If they watch it at a young age, you can convince them, and they'll never touch it.
Yeah, I think I think it depends, right? I mean, if you were a kid that actually grew up in the 80s, you probably would be more inclined to believe that stuff, right? Because my grandfather used to tell us that he lost part of his finger because he picked his nose. So that was kind of like the whole thing in our family. Don't pick your nose, you lose your finger. And no one ever did, right? Because they were terrified that they would lose part of their finger. That was the 80s. I don't know that kids now are going to fall for that shit. Just saying.
Good comedy, good story, good chemistry between characters. It's definitely worth checking out. It's a hidden gem from this year. It's another 2022 horror movie that is damn good. And it's probably going to get lost because of all the quality of horror films that have just released in theaters this year. So this one is going to get lost. So check it out.
Yeah, and especially once the ones that are in the theater start going to streaming, it's just, you're not even going to, it's not going to be there, right? It's not going to be at the top. You're going to have to look for it. You're going to have to look under, specific genres like horror comedy. And unfortunately, some of those streaming services don't have that. Like, you can't actually, and you can't search on some of them, which we found out last night, which sucks.
Yeah. It's almost like we're going back to the 80s if you think about it. Because some of these movies are exclusive to certain streaming platforms, so you'll never get to hear about them unless somebody tells you about them. Yeah. Just like if you, back then, where it's like, all right, people couldn't afford VHS players in the early 80s, so it's like, man, I hope this comes on TV one day on the 5 channels that I got. Yeah. And there was a plethora of horror movies that people didn't get to see in the 80s, like the Reanimator, because they didn't have the opportunity to watch.
It had 13 channels at one point. That was nice.
UHF. Anyway, it is the quest for 5,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there by checking to see if you are subscribed to the channel, and also by
liking and sharing.
Yes. So make sure that you do that, please, because it helps us out. It takes you less than 10 seconds. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. It's free, and you get to learn about movies like this that we just talked about.
Yeah, and we'll give you stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't want free stuff?
Yeah, we have a bunch of posters and pins and coloring books and comic books, oh my, that we can give away for every video that hits 100 comments and 100 likes. Let's talk about horror. It's Halloween time. It's October. It's a fun time to talk about these movies. What are you watching? How are you faring in the contest right now on your Nerdbox horror movie list? And then 5,000 subscribers, win the box of Strawberries and Scream Somebody, signed by Matthew Lillard and David Arquette, and it's worth a pretty penny.
It is.
Anyway,
because you can't get it in the United States.
True.
And it's signed.
And it's signed. Anyway, until tomorrow. See ya.
See ya.